Episode 3 of Life on Earth is called The First Forests, and it basically follows the early plants and early arthropods that first colonised the land. It kind of bounces between the two throughout the episode, showing the development of the intertwined relationships between them. We open up with a sort of montage of various volcanic landscapes, showing you what land was like before plants colonised it, and we explore algae on the sort of coast, and we see how that eventually led to the rise of early plants, things like mosses and liverworts. Algae are sort of portrayed as plants, as they so often are in these series. They're actually not, they're different. And it was interesting looking at these early sort of plants and how they reproduce, because it is very similarly to the way that they would in water. They basically expel the male sex cells. They've basically got to swim through water to fertilise the female ones. I had never really considered that before, but it seems to be the way they still do today. And I really didn't know much about that. I thought it was interesting. I certainly hadn't seen that. I guess they're all quite moist, so it kind of makes sense, I suppose. And then we explore the first arthropods on land. We tend to bounce between three main ones for a while, and those are the millipedes, the scorpions, and the spiders. Millipedes are portrayed as the herbivores, whereas spiders and scorpions as the main predators. And we also explore how they reproduced away from water. They just had to engage in sexual reproduction. And it's interesting looking at the variations between these three different organisms. For millipedes, it's relatively simple. They're both herbivores. There's no real risk of them doing any harm to each other, so their reproductive organs are a bit more exposed. However, for spiders and scorpions, there's a very real risk that they might actually eat each other. So they've got these quite interesting courtship displays, which I obviously knew about, but I hadn't really thought too much into how that must have evolved. Like, obviously it's because they would have eaten each other. And you think about that, all the sort of invertebrates that have really complex courtship rituals are all ones that actually do eat each other. And then the scorpion one's pretty cool. They're holding each other's claws, and one of them is trying to sting the other one, and it is realistically more of a predation attempt. The spiders as well, they're really interesting. It was really cool watching the spiders display their use of silk. You do watch this trapdoor spider laying out its silken web to sort of ensnare victims. That was really interesting, and it was really nice that they highlighted that. It was just a really hypnotic scene, I thought. It was really cool. Other plants, things like your cycads, your ferns, there's a lot of time spent to ferns. Ferns are probably the most prehistoric looking mainstream plant, I would say. I think everyone knows what a fern looks like. I can imagine that's what most of the forests in the time of the dinosaurs looked like, because, you know, they probably were. But the ferns are really cool, because it's good showing you that even though we kind of see them as normal plants, they reproduce in a very different way. They obviously secrete spores from their leaves, which I've seen before in real life, and the way they highlighted it here was very effective, showing you how they wait for things to dry up and they basically spring their spores away. The mechanism was quite cool. I'd never seen that before in a series, I don't think. And as there were more forests, we explored other sort of invertebrates, namely early hexapods, things like springtails and silverfish. The dragonflies are obviously the main animal we're focusing on here. They were really cool, obviously. They were the first flying insects, and they have pretty much remained unchanged. And I think they did a good job of exploring the dragonflies, the molting, the actual way they fly is really interesting, because it's not really like any other insect. And it was good that they highlighted that this was a body plant that's been around for such a long time, because it is pretty perfect. In fact, most insect body plants have remained unchanged for quite a long time, but dragonflies are kind of the apex of that. And it was interesting showing the fossils as well, showing you the early dragonflies, things like Meganeura, their wingspan, showing you that dragonflies have basically just shrunk over time. There's a lot of good stuff with fossilized plants. The best bit is when Attenborough blows up this quarry in Wales. It's just really fun. In an otherwise educational episode, it is the only sort of zany bit. I quite like that. And it was interesting looking at the various fossilised plants over time, things like your early mosses. The petrified forest was really cool. The early conifers were really good. That was a really weird thing, because it's obviously clearly a tree, but it's been turned to stone over millions of years, but it's still obviously a tree. That was really cool. I thought that was really interesting. I'd heard of the petrified forest before, but I don't think I'd ever seen it in a series before this one, so that was really cool. I like that. And we spent quite a lot of time in the rest of the episode talking about conifers. Conifers are one of the two main types of plants. But it's really cool. They obviously reproduce using cones, which they highlight quite well here. And Amber does a good job of highlighting how expensive that is, because they really rely on the wind. They're not using any animals, so they've got to generate a lot of pollen. Insects were able to fly. They kind of diversify. There's loads of different types of insects, and a lot of them feed on plants. A lot of them got encapsulated in the resin that are secreted by conifers. They're still found today in amber. That's really cool. Amber's obviously a pretty famous thing. I mean, it obviously became more famous after the series came out, after Jurassic Park, but it was still pretty well known at the time, and this series might have had something to do with that, I don't know. It was good looking at the variety of insects. It wasn't just dragonflies. You had your various beetles, your various flies. The flies are obviously the most important flying insects. Most insects have two sets of wings. Flies are the only ones that don't. They've got one set, and their hind wings have evolved into halteres. These little sensory organs, they allow them to perfect their position in the air, and allow them to dodge predators and humans in the case of houseflies. The hoverfly is portrayed as the sort of ultimate insect in that sense in terms of flight. I thought that was really good. The stuff with the spider web was great, how spiders have evolved in tangent with flying insects. They've kind of used their silk to construct webs. That was really good. That was really good that they highlighted that. I thought that was really good. The sort of ending of the episode highlights how other plants evolved to work more in tangent with insects, and that's what we'll explore in the next episode. Yeah, this episode is great. I thought it was really good. It was really informative stuff. It does a good job of balancing the narrative between the plants and the arthropods and showing how they evolved in tangent with each other. That was really good, and it does a good job of setting up the next episode, which will further explore that in the forms of pollination. So yeah, that was a really good episode. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this video, what you thought of this episode. Let me know, and I'll be doing the next episode next week, which is all about insects and pollination, which is obviously a really important thing. So look forward to that. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.